glad we're here.
Glad to be here too.
Who are you?
Well, who am I? I could start by my name.
Let's go for names.
Yeah. I usually present my name and I will say where I'm from. I'm from Kenya.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I'm Robert Graham, as you know. I'm a PhD student here at George Mason University, and I have a research focus in educational equity. But at the same time, I have these sort of other identity interests that have sort of led me to be here with you to do this dialogue today.
Right.
So I've got these questions, but at the same time, I'd like for us to follow the meaning and follow what's real and what helps us out. So maybe I'll kick these off. Feel free to jump in at any time, and I think we should be free flowing. And of course, we will be referring to the little bit of the theory that we've got here written on the board here in front of us, as needed to maybe give us a little bit of heft.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. So you said your name. Say your name again, please, so people know what it sounds like when it's gotten right.
I'm Wanjiko Wainaina.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Perfect. Where are you from?
I'm from Kenya. I was born in Kenya, raised in Kenya, and educated in Kenya.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Where in Kenya? Could you give me the name? And then I know it's a little bit early in our conversation, but could you give me a sense of the place? Give the world a sense of this place.
Right. So I was raised in Mombasa, which is at the coastal area of Kenya, and life in Mombasa is very laid back. It's very relaxed. People are very traditional, very polite. There's no rush. And then as I grew older and went to high school and university, I moved to Nairobi, which is the capital of Kenya. And life is completely opposite. Rushed, big city, cosmopolitan, diverse. It's all about money. And so just to show you that there are so many different kinds of lives going on in Kenya. It's a small country. We're about 40 million people. And within each different locality that you would find yourself in, you would find so much diversity. Just in Nairobi alone, moving 5 kilometers in any direction puts you in a completely different cultural mix. We're a diverse country. We have about 40, I'm approximating this, about 40 different ethnic groups. These are all complete whole nations within that forced geopolitical, area. So you can imagine what a melting pot it is. Yeah. So.
And your hometown where you were born. Tell me about that nation.
Right. So I was born in the highlands of Kenya. And I moved to Mombasa when I was really little. So I was raised elsewhere from where I was born.
I think I'm thinking about Mombasa.
Mombasa, okay. So
your peoples. I'm trying to get to your peoples. That's what I'm trying to do.
That's an interesting way of putting it. So Mombasa, so maybe I should start by throwing in that in Kenya we identify ourselves mostly through our ethnic background. When I'm in any setting and I give my full names, as a Kenyan, you're able to place who that person is. That's how we sort of begin to box people. Yeah, you're able to place where that person is. Obviously, that is sometimes wrong. That's not who they really are or what their real background is. So I'm saying this because if you were to understand me from the Mombasa perspective, does not exactly give you an idea of my cultural heritage in that perspective, my lineage or ethnical, yeah. But in terms of culture though, because I am also influenced by that, Mombasa is a mostly Islam culture. There are lots of Muslims there. It's a mix of, historically, it's a mix of Portuguese, of the Arabs who came to trade between the 18th century and probably prior, and a mix of the locals. And we call, the people there are called the Swahili, coming from the language Kiswahili, which they created, a mixture of Arabic, Portuguese, and local languages, and created that. So that's a dominant culture. It also has Indian influences, and you can experience this through the food, through the music, through the dress is mostly Arabic. So in terms of my upbringing and the kinds of influences, cultural influences that were around me was that would probably point you to why I like spicy food. The food there is very spicy, so I have that. That's not my ethnic, food is not spicy. So it's a mix, yeah.
Maybe you answered this, but tell me something signature about the Kenyan people. You said, you talked a little bit about the fact that Kenya is a very diverse place, but if you can, tell me something signature about the Kenyan people, something about them that is strictly a Kenyan thing. Maybe a behavior or an essence or a belief or just something that's boom, that's a Kenyan thing right there.
Wow, that's a big question. I think Kenyans are resilient. I think they're despite what's going on in someone's life, people are kind, people are friendly. I'll probably explain that with a little story. We have these shows, and I've seen these shows here, where you play pranks on people in the streets, and then have it on camera, and then it becomes a show. So there are those kinds also in Kenya, and we always laugh about how, man, people in Kenya are really nice, because if you, as we talk, having conversations about those shows, if you came to me and did this kind of thing, man, I would beat you up, or I would. So that's just, in the streets, people are nice, they're eager to help. Our signature thing is to always tell people karibu, and that's a Kiswahili word meaning welcome. You're welcome in this place.
Karibu?
Yeah, karibu. Yeah, you got it. You're welcome in this place, you're welcome in my home, you're welcome. So it's and probably that also alludes to just the common culture that grounds us, in as much as we are so diverse, that sense of community and well-being for the community. So I would say we are resilient, and that links into just being good-natured people. Yeah.
Were you in Kenya when Obama was elected?
Yes, I was.
The first time?
Yes, I was.
I know this is a super general question, but I don't want to put any boundaries on your answer. What was that experience like for you?
It was amazing. On a very personal level. It was great. I remember I was doing my bachelor's degree, and I remember we had been talking about this. This dominated our conversations in school, in our classes, socially, politically. So it was a big thing. We celebrated. We had a day off. The president made an announcement that we have a day off. I'm congratulating Obama. and Kenya has a day off.
Mhm.
Yeah, so so that just shows you, yeah, we were really, really excited. We owned him. I mean, he was Kenyan. What are you saying? We have our own over there.
That was one of my questions.
Yeah.
Whose president is he? Is he? Because I think he's mine a little bit.
Uh-huh.
And I think African Americans. I mean, that's America's president. But I think, in a way, African Americans. It's like boom! Finally, we have a president.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to say that you own him. I think you'd find some argument here.
I'm sure. I don't know who would end up with him, but yeah.
So, from your perspective, all of this, of course, what effect did his election have on Kenya and Kenyans? Any paradigm shifts happen there? Any changes in the way Kenyans saw themselves and saw the world? You can get at some of that or all of that, or
yeah, definitely. Yeah, there was it's something in the air. It's something in the as you termed it, how people feel about themselves. It was one of our own. I mean, it's his dad. It's not his great. It's his dad, who was wholly Kenyan. So he is part Kenyan. And the fact that he acknowledged it publicly, he didn't try to hide behind it, even when maybe it was detrimental. The fact that he placed Kenya on the map. When you talk about Kenya in some foreign places, they think Obama, right? So he definitely put our collective sense of self-esteem up there. Yeah, that, you can do it. This was, his father was just a guy who pursued education. And this is where that lineage ends up. And the fact that it was so close, so close, it was just his dad, so close to us. So yeah, we collectively as a people, it bolstered our self-esteem, our sense of who we are, our pride in our nationality. And as a country, maybe we were too excited.
What do you mean by that?
By that I mean, as a country, we suddenly thought, oh, this is great. Our own is the leader of the free world, whatever that means. And so we had such expectations as a country, being what they call a third world country, in the South, developing country and whatnot. And so we had such expectations of what that meant. You would hear some people saying, I'm sure I'm getting a visa to the States without a question. One of our own is in. So there was that kind of misguided sense of entitlement. I suppose not fully thought out, but there was that. And when he came,
And over here, we had folks, who thought that, the state of African Americans would instantly change. A second sort of jubilee, jubilee being like freedom from slavery and all that. A lot of folks thought, our plight had really changed. High expectations. Maybe there's been some disappointment or been some reality checking that's happened. But it's interesting to hear how it's played out simultaneously.
Exactly, that's very shared. Yeah, it's very shared. Yeah, so I was saying that when he made his first trip as president to Africa, it was seen as a snub to Kenya because he didn't come to Kenya. He came to the country right next door to us, but he did not come to Kenya.
Where did he come?
He went to Tanzania, I think he went to Senegal and a few other African countries, but he didn't come to Kenya.
Why?
I think the reason that was given was just it wasn't part of his plan, whatever policy was coming to extend, it wasn't part of it. But locally, it was such a snob, it was, oh my God, what is it? So people generally, saw that, had that in bad light. So when he came to Kenya recently, just last year, homecoming. Our son, I bet you there were some newspapers that had our son has gone home.
Right.
So,
Okay.
yeah.
That's wonderful. So, what do you mean by that? By that, I mean, as a country, we had folks, who thought that, the state of African Americans would instantly change. A lot of folks thought, our own is what effect did it have on you personally? That's my question. And I think this is a good time to just maybe refer to this idea that Frantz Fanon talked about. Just this one particular concept that, I don't know, that kind of hit me there. The fact that across the African diaspora, there's this fantasy of a future status that kind of puts the damage of colonization and slavery and all that sort of thing behind us finally getting to this greater place. And I think that the Obama presidency sort of had that torch lit, and I think maybe the torch is still lit. The fact that his presidency has been sort of scandal-free, he's been an upstanding citizen, the family's beautiful, all of these stereotypes and sort of things sort of crushed, all these negative narratives sort of crushed, and us just waiting his presidency out with our fingers crossed, hoping that it's smooth and that, you know, a lot of pressure, a lot of high hopes with this presidency. But I think personally for me, growing up, I thought it was possible to be president. Then maybe around 9th grade, when I really started experiencing like racism, you know, friends I used to play with all of a sudden couldn't play with me. I think right about 9th grade, I was like, it's impossible for a black man to be president of the United States. And if there ever was a black president, he'd be shot dead on day one. So just a ton of hope in the Obama presidency. But it did open up this idea that anything's possible for me. What effect has the Obama presidency had on you personally? Maybe it hasn't, it didn't, I don't know how deep it's got, but
Right.
you can give me something there.
Yeah. I think personally it was just that sense of pride, sharing with America, understanding, you know, the racial history that America has had. And so from that intellectual perspective, I was able to celebrate with America in that sense. Personally, I couldn't say that it had a huge significance other than that shared meaning, that shared sense of celebrating with our fellow black people in America that this can happen. On a personal level, I don't think it touched, other than the fact that we got a holiday.
Did you cry?
No.
Okay.
I was happy. That doesn't mean I wasn't happy.
I watered up a little bit. It wasn't a full prize situation.
Yeah.
There was definitely some, I could feel the moisture factories fired up in my eyes.
Wow, wow.
It's a big deal. It was a big deal.
So that's what I would say.
Yeah, the interesting thing is, I have a feeling that most Americans haven't considered to have a conversation about the effect of the effect of the Obama presidency on Kenya and Kenyan people. I just haven't heard a conversation about it. I haven't seen anything in the media, and I think there's and you know, I like to connect it to what Chimamanda Adichie, her story, actually her TED Talk about the single story.
Right.
Do you mind kind of briefly maybe giving your interpretation of what the meat of that TED Talk is, and then maybe we can talk about how that meat connects to the fact that Americans haven't really had this conversation about the president's birthplace in any kind of meaningful way. Not birthplace, but don't want to say that.
No.
He's been fighting that, but which is crazy. But anyway,
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about the way what you got out of that single story.
Right. So Chimamanda's TED Talk is based on her own experience as an individual from Nigeria, moving to the United States and beginning to experience race for herself. And so she talks about how she's experienced, in her first instances in America, she interacted with people who had no concept of what it was to be an African. They were surprised that she spoke such great English. You know, ridiculous things like, so do you have a lion for a pet? Things like those. And so her point in the TED Talk is just to show how when you have just a limited perspective of something, that becomes the only thing that you know about them. And that, and when you consistently get it reinforced, whether it's through the media, who you talk to, how you expose yourself to things, then that becomes the truth for you about that place. And this place happens to be Africa for Chimamanda and for myself. And given the content or the way, the direction of news, information, the kinds of dynamics that we have globally and how that flows and who generates it and where it goes, Africa has had that one story because one person is deciding to write a story about that place with one perspective. So Chimamanda reinforces the fact that when the point of a story really is about power, who's telling the story and what story is being told. And so that links into the whole African thing. And in terms of how I've interpreted that in my life right now, as I try to navigate these issues of race in America, just as Chimamanda tried to navigate. A typical example, in one of my classes last semester, we were talking with one of my classmates, and she happened to mention Uber, the car taxi thing. And I said, I hadn't used it here, but I've used it in Nairobi. You have Uber in Nairobi? And I said, yeah. And I thought, wow. She has no idea that Nairobi, Kenya, is such a hotbed for technology.
How would she know?
Precisely. That is the question.
And I don't falter because I can see, you know how curious I am, but it never occurred to me. I think the single story business that Adichie is talking about is so powerful that it never even occurred to me to want to know the Kenyan perspective on the Obama presidency.
Right.
And just us having that conversation opens up more about Kenya. And then all of a sudden I've explored Kenya and I know more than this sort of single story. But the dominant narrative is the dominant narrative. So I don't blame your classmate. Unless something pulled her towards Kenya and pulled her towards Africa, there's just really no way that she would know more than this single story. So I have a question for you. What's your race in Kenya?
Wow. So, there's no race in Kenya, if you get my meaning. I never have to feel a doctor's form, a medical form, that I have to check what race I am. When I apply to go to school, a public school in Kenya, nobody asked me to check a box about what race I am. When I apply for a job, at least a non-multinational in Kenya, there is no demographic information that's being collected that asks me, check a box that applies about your race. So in that sense, everyday person, regular person, just minding their own business, living their life in Kenya, there isn't that direct interaction with race. However, there is the white person that comes to Kenya as a tourist. There's the white person that comes to Kenya as a charity worker. There's a white person that comes to Kenya as an expatriate. So there is that dynamic of race. You know your place, that, there's some kind of, sometimes you can experience that kind of deference.
So you're expected to know your place.
Right.
In Kenya.
Yes.
Interesting.
Because we still have that colonial hang-up, there is still that whole history that we're still dealing with, in as much as it's not very obvious, there is still that history where we're coming from. I'll give you an example that I've personally, found telling. When you look at the history, social things in Kenya, right around independence, we had
What year?
independence from the British.
What year?
1963.
Okay.
It was, people's names consisted of a Christian name, some of which are really just English names, and a name from their ethnic group to identify them. When you go to school, you use your English name, your proper name. When you go to school, you speak English. You can see what all that is bringing up. So we moved along, that kind of thing kept going. My generation, people who are now having children, are suddenly starting to name their children just ethnic sounding names, with names with ethnic extraction. They're leaving out the English name. Not all of them, but this is a trend that you can see.
This is a pushback, it sounds like.
Exactly, that's it. So
there's revolution in being who you actually are.
exactly, precisely. And these are people then these are people who would be questioning things like, why can't my child speak Kiswahili in school? Why can't my child learn their mother tongue in school? You're trying to challenge the systems that were set up by the colonial powers that, as a country, we took up, and we are continuing to link this into Fanon's conversation on what is this place that we are all aiming to go to. This is it, right? We gain our independence. This is our chance, I guess, to redefine what it is to be who we are. Fine, we've been structured in this way. Do we even want those structures, right? But then there are consequences to that. I was reading about the Francophone Africa, who suffered colonization from French, and apparently upon gaining independence from the French, they're economically, financially tied to France. They have to have at least 50% of their cash deposited in France, and if they need it, they have to take loans at an interest rate. It's their money, but they can't have it. So as you're trying to set up these political structures right after independence, you still have that thing about your colonial power, your former colonial power is still like your parent, right? And you're aiming to please them because they still have you tied up in some ways that you haven't extricated yourself from.
Right.
So this kind of goes, it spreads everywhere, from cultural things like names, education systems, education policies, political systems, constitution. Yeah.
So, I know that before coming to the States, you spent some time in Milan, Italy.
Yes.
Was that the first time you existed? Was that the first time you became a race outside of your country? In Milan, basically, how did you experience race in Milan?
I would say so, yeah. I would say so in that broad context. The first time, other than, of course, at first feeling the obvious, oh my God, so many white people. It was the first time for me to be in a dominantly white population. And so, of course, that was that thing. But because I like to think of myself as, I'm open, I'm educated, I know how things are, you don't think that there are any hang-ups around or that you have yourself.
Where did you get your, I hate to slow your momentum down, where did you earned your master's degree, your first master's degree, where? In Milan?
In Milan,
got it.
I left Kenya with a bachelor's degree and I gained the master's degree in Milan. So the first time I really thought, wait a minute, what's going on? Is strangely enough, I had an American housemate, a white American housemate, and she asked me, so what do I refer to you as? Are you African? Are you African? What? Are you black? And I thought, what kind of question is that? And then of course when you don't excuse it, but you see where she's coming from.
She was giving you a preview.
Yes, she was.
She was doing it in a harsh way,
Yeah.
doing you a little bit of a favor.
Why do I have to think of myself in such terms?
Mm-hmm.
But then it forced me to start thinking about it. And I had been observing, society in Italy and the racial demarcation because it's very obvious. My experience and my observation of non-European people who are non-European was almost as not existent. Like they didn't exist really in mainstream. And I suppose I should also qualify what mainstream is. I guess middle class, Italian life. They were always on the sidelines. They would be the ones taking the jobs that Italians don't want to take anymore. Construction. You can tell where a certain group of people, what kind of jobs they do.
That sounds familiar.
Right? You could tell. You could just by looking at them, I bet that person is in construction. And you're right. So you could see those groupings of people, especially on socioeconomic lines.
Do me a favor.
Mm-hmm.
I know this is risky behavior.
Yeah.
Tell me a group who would be.
That
Tell me
is
a group who was in the labor part of the labor.
Sure. I'll tell you. North Africans, construction. Construction. West Africans, they're hawkers, street hawkers. They are in the market setting up illegal stalls and trying to sell things without a permit. That's what they always did. Who else? Filipinos are in housekeeping. Yeah.
Interesting.
So those were the ones. Obviously, that's largely stereotyping, but that's the kind of grouping that you
might see.
Yeah, you might see it. Yeah, typically you might see exceptions are there, true, but that's what was going on. And so my own experience as outside of my box, if you get what I mean, the box that I would probably be placed in as a black African, I was existing outside of it. I was leading a somewhat middle class life. I had an office job. I think I shared with you this before. This woman, I was renting an apartment in this building. There were no black people in that building. This Italian old lady that used to see me would say ciao ciao every morning and whatnot. One day she asked me, "What do you do?" And I said, "I work." "Where do you work?" And I told her the name of the company. And she said, "An office?"
Stop it.
And no, I'm so serious. I said, "Yes, with computers?"
You're kidding me.
I'm not. And for me, this was amusing.
Right.
This was amusing because I could see the innocence
Right.
that she is approaching me
Right.
by. How can this be? When this is all I know. Dangerous of a single story.
Right.
This is all I know about these kinds of people. So she always approached me with a lot of curiosity. It was such an anomaly. There were two of us in a multi-complex of over 5,000 people working. There were two black people.
Wow.
And this is Milan, right? This is not Tuscany or Sicily or a small rural.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So that's
This is Italy proper.
right. So that's how I confronted race in Italy. And also the thing that I observed was that when I would go to restaurants with my friends, just regular life again, you would rarely see black people sitting in a restaurant, like just, regular life, you've gone to a restaurant. And if you did, they were either from France, they were either tourists from France or African American,
I think we breezed by an important answer to an important question. Your roommate asked you a serious question. What was your answer to that question? And the question being, what are you? Are you African? Are you African? What do I call you? What are you? What at that time? I don't know if you remember or. If
I do.
What did you give her back, and where were you at that point?
It was
Because this identity thing is an evolution.
It is. I mumbled.
Smart.
I was like, what are you asking? What is this? So I mumbled. I told her I'm African. I'm one of those that who love the concept of being African, what that means. There can be different ideas, and people carry it differently. I have no shame in declaring that, So yeah, there's that pride of who you are and where you come from. So I thought, what is this? I'm African. That's where I geographically place myself, culturally place myself. Of course that's a bigger chunk, but that's where my little framework is on. So yeah, that's what I told her.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're in the midst of making meaning about race in the U.S. And placing yourself in this discourse.
Right.
And when we say discourse, maybe we're referring to James G's theory of discourse. We're talking about this big D, this broad conversation, this conversation that has history and values and power and norms, all these things bottled up in it. This larger conversation that's been going on since maybe some of these ships landed with these different kind of folks and these different kinds of roles. Why have you felt it necessary to join this conversation about race in the United States? I mean, there are a couple of reasons why you could sort of opt out of it. You're an international student, you've got options, you're a Kenyan, you've always got Kenya. There are reasons why you could say, you know what, I'll sit this one out. Why do you feel it's necessary to place yourself in this conversation? This big conversation. High stakes conversation.
Very high stakes, yeah. Life and death stakes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I'll borrow again from Chimamanda. I think you shared this with me. America forces race on you. You can't escape race if you're in America, especially if you're the other. If you're the black person, you can't escape it. You will either be grouped, whether you like it or not, or you can choose to define what that means to you. And therefore, you place yourself in a position of power as opposed to things happening on you, to you, because you've already been grouped. And so my reason for wanting to explore what this means to me in this context is because, going back to G's conversation on discourse, I could be in any setting in America, and I'm talking English. We're speaking English, and I don't know what's going on because I don't understand the racial language. Again, borrowing from Chimamanda, she says I think in one of her talks or in one of her books that because she's externally black, she's expected to be offended when somebody says, you must like melons, right? It's the same thing for me.
She doesn't know that that's a loaded statement with all this history behind it.
Exactly.
She's like, yes, I love melons.
Of course I do.
Who doesn't like melon?
But oh my God, when Rob is in that conversation, Rob will get up and walk out.
Right.
Stomp off in protest.
Right.
But I would be sitting there and saying, so I thought, I want to get involved in that big D, so I can educate myself on it because I do not have that big D discourse. I don't have that history, so that I can learn the small D the words.
Got
What's
it.
going on in that, when somebody uses a specific word, what does that
Right,
mean?
Right.
When I was in Italy, my thinking was, I don't get racism. I mean, my first line of thinking is not that person did that because of my race. No, I'm gonna say maybe whatever. Maybe they looked at my CV and didn't find what they were.
That's wonderful.
That was not. I refused to recognize it, and I kind of got away with it. Here, you can't help it. I mean, you can't help it.
It's the default.
Yeah. So that's my reason.
What have you done to facilitate this process of meaning making and placing yourself in this landscape?
Mm-hmm.
What kind of moves have you made to catch yourself up?
Yeah. So one of my big projects last semester was to read up, get some of these books that talk about it with specific settings. I hope my memory doesn't fail me. I'm trying to remember some of those titles.
I saw you reading Invisible Man.
Yeah, Invisible Man.
I was like, well, she's taking the real journey, no shortcuts.
Yeah, I read that. I read another one by Eugene Robinson about a Black American's experience of race in Brazil. Yeah, so I started reading up. I started exploring things like music, because the artistic life also served as a means for
everything.
Yeah.
Communication, revolution.
Exactly.
Evolution.
Right.
Pride,
Mhm.
expression.
All of that.
Coping with depression.
Yeah.
Heritage.
Mhm.
The whole bit.
I
So
couldn't
that's a
put
wise
that.
choice.
That's it. Yeah, that's it. So and then I read up on the lives of these people just to contextualize it. So for example, the current conversation
I
now
know
in
what
the
you're going to
movie.
say. I'm going to
Do
read
you
your
know?
mind real quick.
What's that?
Go for it.
No.
You're going to talk about what's her name from Avatar? Anyway, Nina Simone, the actress playing Nina Simone.
There you go. Zoe Saldana.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
that's it. So I know what's going on because I've educated myself on it.
You're getting there.
Yeah, I know what's going on. And, it's things that I suppose to a person like Rob are so obvious. But probably to a person like me with no background or context, what is blackface when they're talking? Because I love to read and I'm reading all these newspaper stories or magazine articles. Ta-Nehisi Coates has written extensively on racial stuff. So he's one of another author that I've read up on. So when I'm reading an article and he mentions blackface with reference to Zoe Saldana's role in makeup,
I read that
I'm like, what is it? So see, I've had to educate myself so I know what's going on socially also, so I can participate in these conversations because they are important. And just to get the place of a diasporic sense of what's going on in Black world.
I'm glad you said that.
Yeah.
So when you came, we're co-workers now. When you came to the office, first of all, there's this feeling. I don't know if you felt this feeling. I try to put my finger on what the diaspora, what it means to be part of the African diaspora. But it's this. I think it's this feeling that you know somebody who you've never met before. In a way, I know. And maybe we can peek up here what Stuart Hall says. So when he's talking about cultural identity formation, he's talking about two types of cultural identity. And one of them is this sort of Black common essence, or this Black experience. So there are common experiences that we've had just by nature of being both of us Black on this planet, despite the fact that I came from Los Angeles County, California, and you came of age in Kenya and Nairobi. Despite all that, there's a certain amount of you that I already know the moment that you walk in the door. And part of me wanted to project where I thought you needed to go with this racial identity formation, because it was kind of obvious. I engaged you in a conversation, but it was also kind of obvious that you were sort of finding your bearings with it. And, I feel, and that's dangerous and selfish of me, not allowing you or not wanting you to pick an identity that maybe didn't make sense to me. But here we are. Anyway, I'll sort of complete this thought. So Stuart Hall, he sort of offered these different choices for racial identity formation and acceptance. One of them being this Black common essence, or going with the Black experience, this sort of common thing across the African diaspora. And then there's this sort of second choice that says, wait a minute, time and circumstance and history, despite our common Blackness and whatever that means in DNA terms and all that, despite this sort of common Blackness, we've been moved around. And so that a Black man in Trinidad and a Black man in Jamaica, he's got a different thing going on than the Black man in South Africa, and that's okay, and that's the reality. And then there's this sort of, maybe we can make it all work by combining these two things, by sort of revering this common Black experience, but also recognizing that time and circumstance have made us unique and disparate. How does this sort of work with your journey towards sort of finding your place in this spectacular U.S. Racial landscape? I'll use that word again.
Wow. It's a big question.
Yeah, it is. Big, crazy.
Big question.
But really, we should be talking about, in a fantasy world, we'll be talking about just just the human experience. Just what do you need? But we don't have that option.
No. Live in Kenya, where 90% of the population is Black, look like me, going to Italy and Europe in general, where the population is largely white, especially there. I always looked out for Black people. Anywhere I went, I would always be looking out. Just drawing back into that common Black experience. That you think that we get each other, So I was always looking out for that, because my life at that point did not include people who looked like me. And part of the plan of being here was, I'll be amongst some of my people again. I'll be seeing faces that look like me.
You mean here?
Yeah, to the United States. Part of the thing that was exciting was there would be that aspect. And then I get here and I realize, no, they really are different.
Who's they?
They being
me,
Black, Rob. You representing African American. No, you're not first generation, nothing. You don't have that direct linkage with Africa in the sense that I do. It's different. When I was reading some of those books that I was reading last semester, like Invisible Man, I remember thinking, this is so sad. This life of you're carrying something with you.
No doubt.
From the minute you're born. I kept thinking, oh my God, I can't deal with this. This is so sad. And so realizing that these are my people, so to speak. This is what I had in mind in terms of my people. I can't own their comradeship in that way, because it is so complex. And the fact that it continues in very real ways. While we can we can take that comradeship as an oppressed people racially by the same race. You know, we share that, you know, because of colonization. It almost feels like superficially in Kenya, I don't walk around with this burden.
Yeah,
you know? I don't walk around with it.
You maybe grew up in a safe zone of sorts in that way. But you know, it's not that. You know, you're from kindergarten. You know, the training begins.
Precisely. Largely, perhaps because predominantly Kenya is Black African.
Right, yeah.
You know, here, Black people are still a minority, right? So I started realizing, sure, the color, the shades and whatnot, they might look similar to, but culturally, there's that point of divergence. There is an intellectual shared Blackness, you know, just rooted on our histories, but everyday life is very, very different. And I remember us having a conversation because I was really troubled by, I was scared of America too when I was coming. And I remember when I was applying for jobs, I kept thinking, who do I identify myself as? Because I was aware already of some prejudice, questions that I didn't have when I was in Milan, Italy. I didn't have questions of, on my CV, what name do I want them to read? I had that here. I struggled with that. It was such a big deal for me. And so, you know, I remember me asking you, you know, what does that mean to you when you see such a name? What does that mean to you? So, I think I have diverted from the original point of discussion, but in terms of that diasporic experience of Blackness, I think it's important to be aware of who people are. We have this shared, you know, outward, you know, physicality, but it's important to know where people are so that you can speak the same language, so that you can design the discourse and the language to fit it. So you can make meaning of what it is. And I suppose this is part of what we're doing right now. It's part of it. And it's part of, I guess, some of these themes about nationalization, transnationalism, you know, where you accept that people are different, even though you think you have a shared thing going on. But you accept also that time and place and geographics and politics and economics place you differently. So that's my take on it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything we're leaving out? Any icing we need to put on this cake? I think we can talk forever.
I think we can. I think it's true we can. I do want to throw in a question or two for you though.
Okay.
That I came up just from this discussion. Given especially around the civil rights movement, the conversations of Black Americans at that time, and the amount of comradeship that they had with Africans who were fighting for their independence, and seeing that kind of comradeship that was going on. Fast forward to now, and let's throw in Obama in the picture as well. How does an African American like yourself see yourself in terms of Africa? Do you even think about it? Does it come up in conversation at all? Is the fact that Obama's heritage is so direct to Africa, does that even hold any meaning?
Those are good questions. When I was a kid, my dad used to travel to Nigeria a lot. Maybe I shared that with you. He was working on some kind of projects to increase their capacity to farm and do all kinds of other things. he'd be gone for pretty big chunks of time, you know, like 6 months sometimes. And I had opportunities to travel with him, but I think what I'd gotten from the media and all that, I was afraid to go. I was literally afraid to go to Africa. Can you imagine that?
No.
I was afraid to go. This was late 70s, early 80s, afraid to go. That's what kind of number had been run on me. That's what kind of trick had been played on me. The media's powerful. And culture's powerful, and single story's powerful. It made me not want to go. I pictured in my mind was every kind of stereotype about Africa possible. That's what I thought I was going to. Anyway, fast forward. Now I have this, I'm right to go. I have this fascination. I've done my homework and I've demystified Africa. But it takes, I don't know what drew me there. I can't sum up. I think just heavy reading, in search of a purer identity, and feeling this camaraderie. The more I read about, I'm in the field of education, so for me, I try to bring everything back around to this educational, what does this mean for education? And I've been reading about South Africa, for example, and just seeing that the experiences of the South African student are not that different than mine, and I've got some, maybe I can lend my efforts to put them on a different trajectory. It's like they're at a point where we've been already in some ways they're doing exactly, their journey is exactly what our journey was, even though they've already seen that it's not the way to go. The model is, anyway. I can say that I want to get to Africa. South Africa is a place I want to get to. Kenya, but there's a fascination there. There's a need. It's gone from want to need now. Obama being Kenyan hasn't made that. That's wonderful, but it hasn't. That's not why. That's not why. Maybe some of these younger folks, maybe that would be why. But it's been a journey. I think it's just been a journey. You start out believing that you start falling for every trap, every psychological trap there is, and then and then if you're lucky, you recognize that there's been some trapping going on. So it's just been a journey. I don't know how to put it any other way than. I feel like I'm peeking out from the clouds, and I'm like, wait a minute, that's beautiful. I think I saw some images. The imagery is powerful. I saw some images of South Africa in particular. I know I sound preoccupied by South Africa, but I saw some images. I was like, man, this is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. Like some landscape. It's like, my goodness, this is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. I need to. As a human, you want to go where the beauty is. I'm like, I need to go and see this most beautiful thing. So then I think that sort of sparked my curiosity. But and then when you find out that people aren't that much different than you, and all of a sudden it's doable. One of the things, it starts with, is a trip to Africa doable? Again, the media and the culture will have you thinking it's too dangerous to go. You're not coming back. You'll get murdered, or you're gonna come back diseased, or you're gonna lose your mind in some way. It's like, that's not happening. But it takes messaging is powerful and narrative is powerful. So here I am, ready to go. But the Obama presidency, wonderful me in American terms, but it didn't open me up to Africa or anything. Did it?
It did.
Hit that?
Yeah, it did.
Okay. yeah, that was tough.
Good.
I didn't even really like answering it. It was so tough that it bothered me to answer that question.
That's a good question.
I guess it is a good question. I feel, now I feel spent.
Yeah. Yeah. One last thing.
Mhm.
What are you? It sounds like it's something you're looking to get answered as you seek Africa out.
Mhm. I think I'm following this thing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm following this thing that Fanon was talking about. I've got this fantasy. It's just getting stronger. I guess I'm
Yeah.
getting older.
Yeah.
So it's like, man, the clock is ticking. This fantasy of this. I'm going to read what my note here I have on the board. This fantasy of this future status, where all the damage of colonization in the African diaspora is behind us. And of course, when I'm talking about colonization, I'm talking about it in the terms that Fanon was talking about, just this grander definition where it includes enslaved folks, and it includes damage that was done as colonialism on the African continent, and then to the people who were taken from the African continent and put into forced slavery. So it's all of us having that shared, all the things that come along with colonization, the identity stripping, the psychological damage, the physical damage. So I'm yearning for this future where all the damage of colonization is behind us. And maybe as I travel the African diaspora, there are little clues here and there, and then maybe we put it all together again. I think I'll start every journey needs like a theme, or every trip needs a theme. Lord of the Rings, they're doing the ring thing. Well, I want to see how Black children are educated, and put all the best practices from the African diaspora together, and see what we can do to you see education in the United States, the education of Black folks in the United States, it's kind of, we're not there yet. It's scary, it's shocking. So, I'm searching for, no doubt I'm searching for something. I'll see something good, I'll have the right lens on, so I'll see something good, Anyway, again, another, it's the most loaded question in the world.
So here's the thing, we need to have another conversation post your trip to South Africa.
Yeah, I'm sure I'll be shocked and will have seen some things that scared me and woke me up and put me back at square one again, and I'll see some things that are so beautiful. I'll be mad it took me so long to see them. That's the kind of mission I'm anticipating. Mm-hmm. If I, go about my trip the right way. Yeah. Boots on the ground type trip.
Yeah. No doubt.
It's been a pleasure.
It has.
We'll keep it going.
Yes.
And
Thank you.
Thank you. All right.